Hello everybody, welcome to the video presentation, The Global Food Model by Robertson and John Schooneveldt. We will start by watching the video and then we will open a Q&A session to which all of you are invited. Thank you. Let's start by the video.
Good morning or good afternoon, whichever is appropriate to you. My name is Rob Robertson, and this is an overview of the Global Food Model computer system. Now, just to introduce this, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how it all happened. About 2 years ago, my colleague, John Schooneveldt, and I had a somewhat depressing conversation about existential threats to mankind. Now, this was before COVID, and my focus really was on the potential impact of climate change. But John said, you know, COVID or no COVID, I think in the next few years we may be facing a major catastrophe, because in the next few years I don't think we'll have enough food to feed the human race. And when that happens, we'll have a major problem. And he said, I think a major part of the problem is the way that we're producing and distributing food. It's completely wrong. We're growing food in the wrong places. We're sending it to the wrong places. We're sending it at the wrong times and in the wrong quantities. And we have to fix it or we'll have a real problem. And then he said, but I have an idea. I think we could build a computer tool that could substantially help. So we began developing John's idea. We developed the concept, we developed a prototype. The prototype grew and it's kept on growing. So today, what I want to do is tell you about it. I plan to cover it in 7 major sections. First of all, I want to talk a bit more about the problem, then our aims for the system to address the problem, then a little bit about the concept behind it and some extensions to the concept, where we are today, where we could go and should go from here, and then finally my momentous conclusion. That's an encouragement to stay awake or you'll miss it. So the problem, I'd like to illustrate it with this graphic. This is a table from a publication called Farm Doc Daily. It's a US publication that refers to growth of crops around the world. This is a graphic that shows wheat yield per annum for 10 locations in Argentina, Australia, Germany, the United States, Russia, and the Ukraine. Now have a look at this. This is the top of the scale. It's the Magdeburger region of Germany, and they're producing 9.33 metric tons of wheat per annum. Now, I don't know whether this is the best in the world, but it's pretty good. Compare it with this. This is the other extreme, the wheat belt of Western Australia, 2.04 tons per hectare. It's just over 20% of the German production. And as an Australian, I have to say, really, is this the best we can do? So why the difference? Is it climate? Is it temperature? Is it rain? Is it soil? Wheat? What would make the Australian production better? Alternatively, what if conditions changed, like, for example, with climate change, and the German production got worse? So the major objective of the project was to address those questions. And to do this, we identified a number of more detailed questions. First of all, for any location, what crop or livestock should we grow? For any crop or livestock, where should we grow it? What factors determine the highest yield? For any location, what could we change for better yields? Now, that could be things like soil improvement, irrigation, factors like that. For any crop, what could we do to change to get better yields? That's a little more difficult. That would possibly involve genetic engineering, or if it's appropriate, genetic modification of some sort. How can we track the nutritional value of the food that we produce? How can we blend products to ensure that we get optimal nutrition from them? What external changes might affect yield and quality? And I'm thinking there again of things like climate change. And finally, could this approach that we use be applied to all levels of the food supply chain? Now, let me explain that. This is a schematic showing a stylized view of the food supply chain. We start with a food source, a crop or livestock, and a growing location. The first stage is the production stage. It's the growing stage. We then move to a post-growing processing stage. This can be things like milling, drying, husking, and so on. The next stage is the storage and distribution stage. We then have a possible stage, which is a blending process where we take multiple streams of product and blend them together to get improved nutrition or other qualities. And then the final one is bringing it to the market or table, and there may be some further processing with that, like cooking and so on. So that's the food chain that we're looking at. Let's see how the model deals with this. What I want to do is focus on the first stage of the food supply chain. That's the production or growing stage, as I said. We could look at livestock, we could look at other food sources. In this case, I'm going to focus on crops. This is the main menu for the stage one system. And it basically lays out the analysis steps for stage one. So we start with a set of data for a selection of crops that we're interested in, a selection of data for a selection of locations that we want to analyse, and out of that we produce a crop location combination. So we'll match crops and locations. We then take those crop location combinations and we develop a set of factors that we think are probably going to influence the yield of the final product. We build those factors and we attach them to each of the selected combinations that we're looking at. We take them into the analysis stage. We play around with them, do what-ifs on them, see what seems to produce the best kind of yield for each combination. And then we produce results, and those results may be an end in themselves, or they may be the step towards the next stage of the food supply chain. So just in a little bit more detail, looking at the first three steps here. The first thing that we do is we collect data for the crops that we're interested in. Then we have data for the locations, and then we match them. So here we're looking at, and we don't need to match every crop with every location. We'll only take the combinations that we think are of interest. So here we have one combination, which is a strain of wheat. In this case, it's Canadian Prairie Spring Red. And we're going to try growing it at Tamman, which is part of the Western Australian wheat belt. And we're going to do the same thing with that crop in Germany at the Magdeburger region. So, and then we, as you can see, we have several other combinations that we're also interested in. The next step is to build the set of factors that could influence yield production for those combinations. And having built the set of factors, and there'll be a different set of factors for each combination, depending on their particular characteristics, we match that set to that combination. And the factors are things like growing periods per year, rainfall, temperature, soil type and quality, macronutrients in the soil, opportunities for improvement of yield, which might be soil improvement, or it could be irrigation potential, and typical risks and threats, pests, weeds, the impact of climate change, and other more human things like the possibility of civil war, for example. Having matched the set of factors to the crop location combination, we take it into the hub of the stage, which is the analysis. The analysis screen looks like this. Now, this is pretty detailed. I'll single out just a few things there. First of all, on the left-hand side, we select a crop location combination for analysis. And up there is a drop-down menu that allows us to call up the particular combination that we're interested in. Over here, we have the final result, and I'll explain how that's arrived at just in a minute. So let's look in a bit more detail at this. Here we have an enlarged view of an analysis of Canadian prairie spring red wheat with the Western Australian wheat belt. So the plan is that we will apply factors to the best possible yield that we could possibly expect and see how those factors will affect that and to what extent they'll cause a deterioration in the final yield. So we need a starting point. It can be a theoretical starting point, it can be a practical starting point or a measured starting point, the best yield that we could expect. In this particular case, what I've done is I've taken as the starting point the Magdeburger border yield of 9.33 metric tonnes per hectare, because that's, I think, is about as good as you could ever get. And this gives us the opportunity to say, well, what's different about Western Australia from Germany? So here we're going to look at 4 factors. The top one there on the list over on the left-hand side is rainfall. Then we have temperature, we have soil type, and we have soil porosity or water retention. Here we will look at the top one. Across here you can see the factor details that we're going to use. So first of all, on the left there, we have details for the location. And it's pretty straightforward here. What we're using is the average annual rainfall for this region, which is the Western Australian region, or it's possibly the average for the growing season. In this case, average rainfall 355 millimetres per year. Here we have a range of acceptable conditions for this particular wheat crop. We have 3 values: a minimum, a maximum, and an optimal. The minimum value, below that, the wheat won't grow at all. Above the maximum, which might be extremely high temperatures or very high rainfall, the wheat won't grow. In between, there's a range where we will get a yield from the wheat crop. The optimum rainfall in this case being the one that is the best we expect the best yield from. So you can see here that there is a variation between the optimal for the crop and the actual for the location. So we're talking 355 millimetres versus 450 millimetres optimal. From that factor, we then calculate a multiplier that we can apply to the yield to see to what extent this factor reduces the yield. The calculation that we use is a comparison of optimal and actual. It's taken as a fraction of the actual, and we get a multiplier that's somewhere between 0 and 1. In this case, the multiplier that we've calculated is 0.79. So we take the original 9.33 tonnes per hectare, we multiply it by that 0.79, and we get a figure of 7.36 tonnes per hectare, which is the calculated expected yield after applying that factor. We then do the same thing for temperature, which reduces that yield even further, and we go on down the line for any factors that we feel might be of influence. The calculation that we just used is a very simple one. We have a variety of different formulae that we can apply depending on different circumstances. In some cases, it might just be an either or. Either the nutrient is in the soil or it isn't. If it is in the soil, it'll grow. If it isn't, it won't. In other cases, it's a range like the one that we have here. So the formulae are specified by that column there. We used formula 1. You can see that for others, we've applied formula 2 and formula 5. And excuse me, and they give various different results when they're applied. Here we've got 8 formulae. These can be added to, modified, changed very, very easily depending on what we know about the characteristics of the crop and the location. So the end result of all of that is number 7 on the list, and that's recording and comparing results, and either treating that as an end in its own right or taking the results of that and moving them on to the next stage of the food supply chain. So here are a typical set of results. On the left side, you see crop. The next area is details of the location we've matched it with. The input quantity, input yield that we put in. So in some cases, that's 9.33 tonnes per hectare. I think it's in kilograms in this case. And the green column is the resulting output after we've applied those factors. The other information I'll come to a bit later. And we can take that, we analyse it within the system, or we can drop it out into an Excel spreadsheet, view it in different ways. This is a visualisation in 3D, looking at the different crop location yields and comparing them, and you can look at those and see which appear to be the best. Using Excel, you can then rotate it. You can do fly-throughs and generally get a better feel for the results. So that's the basic concept, and that was for stage 1. What I want to do is look at some extensions now, and I'm going to take stage 2 to generally show how this principle that we looked at in stage 1 can be applied to stage 2 and also to later stages of the chain. So let's have a quick look at this. This is the processing stage, and as I said, it can involve things like milling, drying, husking, pasteurizing of milk, and so on. Again, the process looks very similar to stage 1, apart from the fact that the menu is blue. There is another important difference, and that is in the first 2 steps. In stage 1, you'll recall that we took a crop and matched it to a location to give us what I was calling a combo, or if you like, a stage 1 product. In stage 2, it's a bit different, because in this stage, instead of matching crop and location, we're now matching the result of that, the stage 1 product, the crop and location combo. We're matching it with a processing plant, which effectively gives us a new stage product, should be stage 2 product, not stage 1, or a new combo that is the result of taking the output from stage 1 and processing it, subjecting it to some sort of process. We still use the same concept of applying factors to yield. The factors will be different because they relate to processing rather than growing. So we've got things like distance to the plant from the growing area, the time to the plant, setup time at the processing plant, the processing capacity, the efficiency of the plant in terms of management and quality control, risks and threats, which are different here. They're more things like government regulation, tariff, and so on. And we do also include some costing in this. The analysis screen looks similar. Again, it's blue, not green. Over on the left-hand side now, we select the crop location processing plant combination, and we apply the new set of factors to it to see what the outcome is. The important thing to note here is that the starting point for this is not a theoretical maximum. The starting point is now the actual yield from this crop location product coming out of stage 1. And then we apply the factors to that, and we come up with, down the bottom there, the resulting yield after processing. A couple of other things that I want to comment on, because so far we've been looking at yield, but there are 2 other things that are important. First of all, yield in its own right is of not much value. If we produce a high yielding product that has no nutritional value, then we might as well not have done it. So what we also do, as we track the yield through the food supply chain, we also track the nutritional value of that yield at the same time. And we can update that and modify it as we go through each stage of the process. Similarly, we carry some cost information. Now, it's not intended as a full cost accounting system, but it is important that we have some idea of cost, because if we're in a situation where the cost of producing a particular food is so prohibitive, then it's not worth doing the analysis. Slightly different from nutrition. Nutrition, we have one set of nutrition data going right through the system. Here we have multiple sets of costs, because we keep track of each stage separately. So we have the total cost of production, we have the total cost of processing, and the total cost of the later stages. Keep them all separately, but we can also total them to give a full cost for the whole process. And again, we come up with a results table very similar to the stage 1 results, except that here we're looking at quantity in and quantity out for the combinations of crop, location, and processing plant. And there's a note there on that screen just to say that you can also, from this screen, drill down to much more information about yield, about cost, and about nutrition. And basically, that's the process that, as far as we can see, equally applies to the later stages of the food supply chain. The blending is a little bit more complex because here we're dealing with a couple of different products being merged together, or possibly a number of products merged together to achieve some end, improved quality or better nutritional value or something. So let's talk about where we are today. We started with a concept. The concept was that we should be able to match food sources to locations and identify which factors make the difference. We then built a prototype, which basically showed that the concept was sound in as far as we could determine it with limited data. And it also indicated that factor analysis process is extremely flexible. The end result of that was we came out with a clearer picture for a whole system. We determined that the application could be cloned for later stages, again with minor modifications for blending, and the factor analysis appears to be equally applicable in later stages. And not only did we prove the concept, but we've ended up with stage 1 and 2 as functional systems in their own right. So we can put them to work straight away and use them to identify things like preferred food sources and locations, impact on nutrition and cost, effective limiting and enhancing factors, what could be done better, and what if things change, like, for example, climate change. So where do we go from here? We do need further action. First of all, we need to do some live data testing of the system. To date, we've used test data that we've generated ourselves. We need real field data. We need to put together a beta testing team. If you're not familiar with beta testing as a concept, the first testing is done by the developer. That's alpha testing. Beta testing is where somebody comes in with live data, somebody that's independent, and tests the system to see whether there are things that they're not happy with. We need to get more experience with factor analysis. This is as much a skill as it is a science. The more we use it, the more we'll be able to drive it and make it give meaningful results. Similarly, with the formulae that we apply, we can change those very easily. We will learn over time how to use them effectively. We need to tailor the system to use the terminologies that are used by other industries, by food scientists and nutritionists and so on. So we'll need some input on that. Ultimately, of course, we have to clone stage 1 and 2 to produce the later stages, and we need to sort out exactly what we're doing with the blending stage. And the other thing that we will need to do is to look at possible collaborative ventures, because our resources are very limited. We need people that can assist us in the provision of real-life data, in joint venture applications, and maybe even, if it is warranted, to be a lead partner with us as a support group. So, I promised you a momentous conclusion. It's maybe not all that momentous, but it's interesting, I think. I need to say something about models. In 1976, a US statistician, George Box, was quoted as saying, "All models are wrong." In fact, what he said was all models are wrong, but some models are useful. So why are they wrong? Well, they're wrong because they're based on assumptions about the real world instead of actual real world facts. Now, we think that the global food model is a bit different. The assumptions in the global food model are external to the model because they are, in fact, the factors that we've been talking about. And the factors are in the hands of the user. They're not built into the model. They can be changed. The model itself is just a shell on which you build the assumptions or factors. That means that by applying the factors and by experimenting with the formulae, we can learn an enormous amount about what works in food production. And from that point of view, it should prove useful in George Box's terms, but also as our experience with the model develops, it should become increasingly accurate. Thank you for listening. Be happy to talk further.
Hello. Unfortunately, it seems that neither Rob nor John are present in the session for the Q&A answers. But anyway, thank you very much, Rob, for the clear presentation of the model. It looks really, really interesting. And I will close by asking if someone can assist with real data or with skills. Please contact both authors to help them to work with model. Thank you